So we're still working. We're still using the same questionnaire. I think we're using the NSSF contributor. If you don't have it, just go to your portal. So there's a lot of materials that have been uploaded there. So you can go and download the one NSSF customer satisfaction survey. I think that is what we were using. And if you download it, we will proceed with now the question. So I don't want to explain much, but maybe today I'll be doing most of the work and you'll be doing more of watching. And then after class, you will have a chance to go through whatever we cover today. So one, if you understand the interface, then it means the next thing you need to know is the types of questions or type of variables, or basically what I mean here is how are questions structured in a questionnaire. Take home here is questions will always be structured in two ways. Basically, if you have to come up with a questionnaire, in most of the cases, you realize you can either frame a question in a manner where the respondent has only one option to choose, or you can again come up with questions whereby uh, the respondent has the ability to select more than one answer. So what I'm talking about here is today we will have a chance to see what you call the single select questions, questions like gender, whereby somebody can only choose one, either they're male or female. And then we'll also have a chance to look at the multiple select questions, whereby these are questions that somebody is not limited or is not limited to the responses that they can give. So we call them multiple. You can give as many answers as you find it fit. So I hope you can be able to see my screen, and I'll go straight to, let me start with gender, now that I'm the one doing it, so you can just follow through. So I said encoding variables, or when you're keying in information into your variable, then there are two ways that you use the name. Like for my case today, I'll be assigning names to the specific variable. And then you said if you give it a name, then again you need to know the type of that variable. So in this case, I'll code gender as numeric, and we know the reason behind that. For width, we know what it does, and also for decimal, I will adjust to 0. Label is to give more information, so I'll just say gender. For values, I'll leave it at none because we'll be working under the assumption that we're not anticipating any missing cases. Uh, for values, though, I would say now let the value of 1 represent the males, and then I can say let the value of 2 represent the female, and then I add. Remember, this one is a nominal. I don't know if we talked about the different measurement levels, but for nominal variables like gender, it doesn't matter which values comes first. So basically, we are saying the values that represent the categories are not actually weights assigned to those categories. We're just saying if you want to identify a male, if you see 1, then you're good to go. Then you're saying also if you want to see a female, then let them be represented with the value of 2. So I hope that is clear. And the missing, I will leave it like that. Not anticipating missing. Column, again, I'll leave it at 8. Alignment, it will be right by default. And the measurement, I will say nominal. What are nominal measure? Now, we talked about methodology, and we say when you will be defending your methodology, especially maybe I don't know if my audience is more of academic or people who are already practicing, but bottom line is at some point you need to tell people what you intend to do before you actually even give them data or start talking about insights. So during methodology, there's a where when on operationalization of variable, you need to say this is my variable and this is the proxy, or this is how I'm intending to measure a specific variable. So what are nominal? So nominal measure are basically those variables. Of course, noun, nominal nouns, they're just names. And there's no statistical criteria that warrants any ranking. If you want to identify a nominal variable, you'll say there is no specific criteria for ranking of response. And what do I mean here? We're just saying that when you are assigning values to the answers, then the numbers are not weights. I think I had already explained that. So you're saying it's nominal, there's no criteria for ranking of variable of response. Uh, I'll go to the second one under the same questionnaire. So I'll say the second one is age. And I think there's somebody who had, I don't know if it's Collins, I think was asking about age. You say age is numeric, adjust decimal to 0. I'll write exactly what is in the questionnaire. So they have said age in years. In terms of value, I'll say let the value of 1 represent 18 to 24. Let the value of 2 represent 25 to 34. Then let the value of 3. So I hope you're getting the drill. Huh? So if you're doing the same on that side, you should be good to go. So 35 to 44. And then 4 will be now 45 to 54. The last part I think is above 55. So be careful again when you script questionnaire. So these are more communication skills here, whereby you need to know maybe the difference between above 55 and when you say 55 and above. You will know that those they mean two different things. So pay attention to that kind of detail. So if I click OK, I should be good to go. In terms of measure, I would say age in this case is ordinal, and I'll explain ordinal in the sense that there's some sort of order in as far as the response are concerned. A very good example is the Likert scale type of question. I think if you look at this questionnaire and is it question number 3? Yes, question number 3 on mission and core values. If you check the way those answers have been structured, you realize they have some sort of weight assigned to the response, whereby for the person who's very satisfied, you can see there's a value of 5 there. So we are saying the most positive response is assigned the highest weight, while the most negative person is assigning the lowest weight. So this is a good example of an ordinal measure of a variable, whereby there's a criteria that warrants the ranking of those responses, and in this case you will say the most positive response is assigned the highest weight, and the most negative response is assigned the lowest weight, and so forth. So I don't want to dwell so much on that. I think you can read and you'll understand. So I'll go to the third question, and the questionnaire, and it says what? The occupation. So what is occupation? So you can realize occupation is more or less the same as gender. Whether you're employed or self-employed or claimant, there's no any criteria that says a self-employed person is better than somebody who's employed. So it's a nominal measure. So in this case, I would come to my variable view, and then I'll say occupation is the name, and it's numeric. I adjust decimal to 0, and then occupation, I'll just say occupation. There's nothing much. And then under values, now I'll say let the value of 1 represent somebody who's employed, and then you add. Then you say let the value of 2 represent the guy who's self-employed, and then let the value of 3 is now the claimant. So basically claimant is that, so I hope you understand how NSSF works, which again takes me back to the need for you to understand the context. So if you're an analyst and you want to analyze information on under oil industry, then you need to have a domain knowledge of the industry with the data you're dealing with. So in this case, it's more you need to understand who the claimant. But when you're writing a report, you know, okay, a claimant maybe is the person who was paying premiums for the same, so or the client now of the organization. So the knowledge of domain you're dealing with plays a huge role in your career or you succeeding as a data analyst, as I'm sure you guys are trying to pursue. So I'll click OK. In terms of measure, I would say occupation is just nominal. There's no order in ranking of those response. And I hope we're getting the drill. So I don't want to really to focus more on single select unless there is a special case for someone who has a question about this question where somebody has only one option to choose. Uh, Maybe I give some 30 seconds for that to reflect on that. And if there's a question somebody can raise before I introduce multiple select. Okay, so if there's no question or concern, now let's go to multiple select and then you see what is this thing we call multiple select or how do you handle such. So let's pay attention to this questionnaire we have here. And there's that part of section B where it talks about awareness. So if you read on the question, it says, which were your sources of awareness about NSSF? And the instruction says, do not read out, and it's multiple mention. So this is a very deliberate move because the person who was coming up with this questionnaire was so sure of what he wants. And he says, what one, the person responding has the chance to say as much as they want. Okay. Two, the person conducting the session or the person doing was administering the questionnaire has no right to tell anything to the respondent. So these are now very fundamental uh, guidelines that if you are the analyst or if now you are the end user of this process, then you realize that chances are you will maintain the quality standard of whatever you're collecting from the field. And I think I've been to certain panels whereby there's some points whereby we ask questions for people who want to be analysts. We ask maybe someone, uh, and actually this one is interesting because you find someone who can come to an interview and is very loaded with uh, technical kind of skills. So somebody understands well about regression, about algorithms, about most of those technical things, and then you ask them, how will you ensure that the data you are analyzing met the quality standards that uh, is set by a client? And that's when now you realize somebody was really good at what he does in as far as explaining how he will arrive to the answers. He has no clue. I hope you understand me here. So what I'm saying is the knowledge of now coming up with guidelines that will lead the process of collecting data is crucial. And that is what set the difference between analyst A and analyst B. So as much as you are the more of a data guy, also you should be in a position to understand how to script a questionnaire or structure a questionnaire in a manner that meets the standard. So how do you handle multiple response question? One, let me start with this part. So if you look at the answers, they've said what? In as far as this process is concerned, the respondent will be giving out information. And if they mention anything that is listed here, then that is when the research assistant will check. So if somebody mentioned radio, that is when they'll check radio. If they don't mention TV, the research assistant will not check TV. And same applies to newspaper all the way. until now, these are the part of other. So let's look at this other specify and maybe see how do you handle this part. Now, when when you have this part of other specify, one, you realize it's an open-ended question. And with an open-ended question, it means the type of information you're collecting is qualitative, it's text data. So if somebody has a platform which is not among the platform listed here, then they have the ability to write there. Okay, or now the research assistant will now write, if somebody maybe mentioned Facebook, and if you look at those answers, Facebook is not one of them. So if Facebook is mentioned, the research assistant will click yes, if maybe they're using an electronic platform. Like for this case, we were using an electronic platform. So if somebody takes other, and then now they will be prompted to specify. And what are they specifying? So they write that Facebook. So how do you handle this kind of information? And they said this information, we call them qualitative. And with qualitative analysis, this is one of the, yeah, I can say the hardest part of research, because with quantitative, the software is there for you. But for qualitative, now bringing sense out of text data, it's an interesting journey whereby now, I don't know if maybe for those who have interacted with statistics, you can recall when you talk about things like sentiment analysis, you're trying to analyze the mood of maybe, let me say, moods of Kenyans about the economy. So you go to on social media platform like Twitter and you say, okay, let me analyze on what people are talking about so that I can come up with a hashtag and say maybe, though this one is the wording that is being used today by majority of maybe social media users. And then from there you say, okay, the moods of Kenyan is they're very happy people with their economy and their government. So that's the kind of road that maybe somebody should envision when you talk about qualitative. So, but in this case, since we're handling a quantitative class, then we'll say what this part of other specify, you will not code it into the software. This is what I mean. You will not again say Facebook, you're going to code it now in your SPSS. No. But instead, either you'll read, which now that's still the tricky part. So if you're having 1,000 questionnaire, then you have to read 1,000 answers. But yes, so you read whatever your respondent are saying, and then you develop what you call themes, or we call it thematic analysis. And basically, when you say themes, it's more grouping together individuals who are basically talking about the same thing. Let me use an example. Assuming I was asking Gloria this question about NSSF, and then Gloria says Facebook. I ask Julius, and Julius says Instagram. I ask Wekesa, and Wekesa says, let's say, WhatsApp. Okay, and then I ask Magdalene, and Magdalene says what? Twitter. So maybe somebody should tell me what's the common thing between all these platforms that I'm being mentioning here. Anyone? What is this? Facebook, Twitter?
Yeah, social media.
Yes, as simple as that. You don't even need to think twice. So if you were to come up with a theme, then I would say I will categorize all these guys that I've just mentioned and said there were 4 respondents who were mentioning social media, as opposed to now saying Julia's mentioned Instagram. I'm sure you're getting the drill. So basically, what I'm saying here is when you are dealing with this type of question, one, you read those answers that your respondents are writing, and then after reading them, you group them together in what you call themes. And now these themes are the one you take to the final report. So when you're writing a report, that is when now you say, maybe apart from radio, TV, and newspaper, there are these 4 respondents who are mentioning social media. I hope now that is clear. So what I'm saying here is Qualitative text, you don't take it to a spaces again. No, you take it, you read, understand, digest what people are saying, develop themes. From those themes, you take it to now uh, your report. Now you say what was happening. But now in an event whereby now this takes me back to methodology, and I will still insist being in this class is not a replacement of statistics and research methods, because you will again need to say in terms of, maybe let's go back and let's say we talk about the research design, whereby you say when you are coming up with a research design, you say I would use a mixed method, or I would use a descriptive research design approach. Whereby if you say, for instance, my study is going to adopt a descriptive research design, then you realize, okay, then what are the tools that I will use? Will I use a KII mostly, or I'll use a questionnaire? And if you go on the road of a KII, you know that, okay, maybe now I have to interview, let's say, 10 respondents or 20 respondents. That is now a more of a qualitative kind of a research approach. And you realize now in such a case, then maybe there's when you say, okay, I will no longer need SPSS as my tool for analysis, but now I need NVivo for my tool of from now uh, for you to do your analysis. So what is NVivo? NVivo is just SPSS for qualitative. So if you want to develop this, if you want a software that can develop things for you, then you'll say you need knowledge of now this other side. So I hope now we are good in as far as how to deal with qualitative data is concerned. So either you read or you use a software called NVivo. Let's go back to what we are supposed to do here. Now the quantitative. The remaining part is now closed-ended. And for closed-ended, you have no choice but now to code in your software. So we'll have to code in the SPSS the closed-ended question. But now again, how will we code it? Now that you're giving one respondent a chance to choose more than one option. Okay? Now, let's digest this. If somebody checks or you tick that part called radio, then basically you're saying radio was one of the platforms that you used to obtain information about an SSF. Okay. So how will you put that in form of now the technical part, the computer part of it? So you remember we talked about binary, and we said computer understands the language of uh, one and zero, or numbers basically. So here you'll say if somebody used, if somebody mentioned a platform, then it means they're saying yes to that platform. If they don't check a platform, then it means they're saying no to that platform. Guys, what I'm saying here is you will treat each of the response as variable. I repeat, when you're handling multiple response questions, you treat each of the response as variable. And then the way you respond to those now responses which are now becoming variables, now it will be a yes and no, whereby it's more like you're asking someone, is radio one of the sources of awareness on an SSS? If they say yes, it means yes. If they check it, it means they're saying yes. If they don't check it, it means they're saying no. So that is how we're going to now develop, that's how we're going to code it now uh, in our software. So let's look how practical that is. Uh, so if you are the variable view, you will say what? You will say the first. Now you remember we said um, the response are now becoming variable. So which is the what is the first response? The first response is radio. So I'm coding radio as a variable, and then I say what? It's numeric, decimal zero. Radio, I just say radio. And then in terms of values, I'll say let the value of one represent yes. So that means if somebody checks uh, Radio, it means they're saying yes. And then let me use two. Though at a later stage we will talk, we'll have a discussion about should we, what does it mean when we use two and when we use zero. So are we talking about dummy or what? So it's, but I believe again we already understand for those who maybe are doing economics. I don't know my the what you guys are doing, but if there's somebody who has been to an economics class, then you will understand the concept behind dummy. So you can say maybe we say the user of a platform is now the guy we're interested with, and then the person who doesn't use a platform is now we make it a dummy by now representing the value of zero. Anyway, so we say two is for no, and then you add, and then you don't have to repeat all these things. So if you know more, it's the same thing in as far as the response are concerned. So you can always copy. But here I'll say radio. So the second one is TV, numeric, zero, television, and then now this way I pass. I don't have to be writing the same thing over and over. After radio, maybe let me use the last one, which is newspaper. So I'm saying the last one because it's more of a repetition. So even if you have 20 multiple choices that people can choose from, so it's the same drill. So the only thing you need to know is maybe the difference between the other specify and now this close-ended response. Newspaper, numeric, zero, and then again I'll just say newspaper. Uh, and then again I pass the measure. So here is just nominal, binary. So all of them are nominal. So I think up to there we are cool. So let's see how things should look like in the data view. And if you go back, we said data view is the interface where you put cases. And what are cases? Cases